9 here on Kiwi. Time for the latest in New Science. We do it with Janine Young from New Scientist magazine. Good morning, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
And today, first up, this is an interesting topic and topical here in New Zealand because controversially, and it shouldn't have been controversial, but our Trade Minister, Tim Grosser, was giving an interview, I think on the weekend, where he said that it would be great if all Kiwi kids could grow up learning the Maori language. Reason being is that it helps them to learn other languages around the world, also helps with the brain development and all kinds of other things. And then this article now pops up in the latest New Scientist backing up those claims.
It sounds like he's right.
Yeah.
For a long time it was considered that teaching kids a second language, and certainly up until probably only 40, 50 years ago, it was thought that it would actually stunt a child's growth, that they wouldn't reach their full potential, that they would become a jack of all trades in both languages but not master either of them. Turns out that's completely wrong, and children and subsequently adults who learn more than one language are actually at a distinct advantage. Their brains work really quite differently from poor unfortunate monolinguals like me.
And me.
I was fluent in German, but then I stopped speaking it and it's gone, just lost. But equally, I learnt it when I was young, and that makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
I tried learning French a few years ago, and it's hard. It's really hard. Anyway, back to what's good about it. If you look at a child's brain when they're about one and they speak only one language, if you like, the window of opportunity, the way their brains function, tends to close around about the age of 1. But if you look at the brain nicely, obviously a 1-year-old, you don't want to go doing invasive techniques, but they have these caps they can put on them where it's completely uninvasive and the kids are barely the wiser, aside from in fact trying to rip it off because they've got something on their head. You see that their brains are actually still quite active when they hear a language that they've never heard before. So it means that that activity hasn't shut down. And they think that that's a mechanism to allow a child to be able to learn further languages as they get older. So once again, your minister was right, and it seems that it's actually a really positive thing. Another big benefit is that it changes the way you're able to focus. Your brain, when you speak two languages, is constant, or the two languages are constantly competing for attention, which means that when you are asked a question, for example, and there's been several experiments over the years that have shown this, if you're asked a question to find, say, a marker in Russian and English, the two words are actually remarkably similar. So apparently what these people do is they scan what's in front of them when they're being asked to physically pick it up, and they look at the other item before picking up the correct one. They never misunderstand the question, but their brain is kind of going, oh, which one do I actually want? Oh, that one. And it means that the brain is actually more flexible and it's much more focused than a monolingual's brain, because it's able to filter out a whole bunch of useless information. It's actually much, much more focused. For example, another experiment. The phrase, apples growed on trees, is clearly grammatically wrong. Everybody can pick that, you know it. But the phrase, apples grow on noses, is grammatically correct. A bilingual will look at that and go, yep, grammatically incorrect, no problem. A monolingual, like me, and I did this when I read it, went, that must be wrong. Because we're so busy being tied up with the meaning, we're not actually looking at the task at hand. A bilingual person can do that.
Wow.
Their focus and their executive function, which is a suite of mental skills that allow us to do these sorts of things, to filter out useless information and concentrate on what we're doing, is completely different. They're much more focused, but their brains are much more flexible. And that has benefits into later life as well, because people who are diagnosed with dementia, if they speak a second, third, fourth, fifth language, they actually get their dementia a lot later. There's years delay. Same thing with Alzheimer's. So it seems that the way your brain functions when you speak a second language, and your personality can be different as well, but we can talk about that if you're interested, everything changes according to speaking a second language. So I'm all for it. I think we should be speaking second languages. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, very, very good idea. And interesting, though, that, talk about that multitasking, and which is so much more important these days in this modern world with technology, balancing technology and the actual doing of things as well. Very, very good.
Well, the fact that we all speak English, we're actually at an advantage because it means that we can go pretty much everywhere and be understood. But we're at a disadvantage because we have almost no incentive to learn other languages because everybody speaks the language we do. And unless you are surrounded by it or you're forced to speak another language, there's very little incentive to do so. And as I said, I was fluent when I was 14, actually 16, and then I stopped and completely lost all of it. And I'm really cheesed about that because I think being able to speak a second language is really important. I feel vaguely inadequate that I can't. So, again, no incentive.
Okay, all right, moving on to this meteorite that was seen in the skies above California a couple of weeks back. You might have heard about this one. Turns out this meteorite was actually quite rare.
Absolutely. This type of meteorite is a CM chondrite. There'll be a test later. There's only 1% of all the meteorites that fall to Earth, and an asteroid, by the way, which we were talking about a few weeks ago, is the kind that stays in the sky and orbits. A meteorite is actually one that comes through the Earth's atmosphere.
Right.
That's the critical difference between the two. This CM chondrite is only 1% of all the meteorites that fall to Earth, and that makes it rare in itself. They don't know whether or not it's because they burn up a bit more easily, whether there's fewer of them. No one actually knows. But it's estimated that 30 grams of one of these meteorites is worth about $6,000.
Wow.
But it's more important for understanding what goes on in the solar system and all that sort of stuff, because they, in addition to being rare, also have an interesting mix of components. They have a lot of carbon, a lot of oxygen, and more interestingly, a lot of amino acids. There's a theory that these meteorites are responsible for seeding the Earth with the first building blocks of life.
So essentially a meteorite from the Big Bang, the very beginning, and that's been floating around out there ever since.
Oh, look, a lot of these rocks have been thrown off from collisions. From planet formation. There's a number of different ways that these sorts of rocks can come into being, and how they get travelling through the universe and the like can be slightly different. But a lot of these rocks have been around for a very, very, very long time. So dating it is obviously going to be a priority. But trying to understand whether or not it is actually the type that contributed to the beginning of life on this planet is, of course, interesting to a lot of different people. When it landed in California, they had 1,000 people out looking for it. Obviously, a lot of people saw it, and they were interested in trying to get their hands on it and trying to help scientists work out where it was and what kind it is, and whether or not it can contribute to any kind of understanding of how life began on the planet. And
they have found, obviously, because they know what it's made up of. But I saw a photo of a guy the other day in a car park, and he found a tiny piece in a car park, and it just looked to me like any other kind of pebble or rock in a car park. But these people who know this stuff, they seem to they scan out and looking at the space in front of them, and they'll see something that's out of place and know that it's a meteorite.
If you know what you're looking for, I guess it's like that with anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue either, but the way they burn up in the atmosphere apparently makes them a little bit different than ordinary rocks.
Yeah. Indeed. Janine Young is over at New Scientist magazine, and you'll find those stories in the latest magazine, also newscientist.com. Thanks, Janine.
Thanks a lot. See you next week.
Here's